First of all, I did not realize that this top film, what is it, um,
Chantal Ackerman.
Chantal Ackerman. I didn't realize this was like a 3.5 hour film. So I rewatched Repulsion, Roman Polanski's Repulsion last night, and I watched this this morning. And I'm not sure, Dan, if you ever get this like feeling when you watch a movie. So first of all, one thing that's kind of surprising is many movies that you watch that turn out to be, not good or just mediocre or whatever, they often have still either interesting or like a little bit daring beginnings, right? There's like the first few seconds or maybe the first couple of minutes that seem like they might go in a really good direction. I think more often than not, the problem is not even like to find to do that part well. It's really how everything tends to devolve over time. And specifically with this film, where I'm just going to call it by, I guess the short name. What is the short
Jeanne
name?
Dielman.
Yeah, let's just call it Jeanne Dielman. Like when it begins, right? There's nothing inherently. So first of all, the film itself, I wouldn't call it, bad in the traditional sense of like a bad movie, right? But it's a movie that's just obviously way too long and says far less, given its runtime, than something like Repulsion. But in the first few minutes, right, we just have this kind of domestic scene where she's just kind of like puttering around the house. Something like that often has like it could be the start of something good when she eventually takes like some John into her bedroom. Right, this is unexpected. The fact that it's filmed with this kind of door closing and then it's darker suddenly and it's opening again. I mean, that's all technically well done. Then there's like other parts where her son comes home and they're just kind of sitting around and for a long time, no one is speaking, right? So that's definitely, it's not the sort of thing where have like most filmmakers who are putting in these details for no reason. Here, there is a reason, and it's clear, right? The reason is we're just going to show both of their characters. We're going to show what they're dealing with. Specifically here, it's like they don't really seem to have too strong of a relationship. There's no like, there's very few cliches in the film, except when there's that second kind of more extended conversation with the son where he starts saying some trite things about belief in God, that kind of thing, whatever. But it's just like a film that's mostly kind of formless, right? That's kind of and generic for that reason, right? It's not a classically bad film, right? There's just not much to it.
Well, I mean, when you look at, I was looking at a couple of days ago, some YouTube channels reviewing it, some young kids seeing it, and someone said, "Oh, they use the same static shots like Yasujiro Ozu does in his great films," or things like that. And it's like, well, number one, uh, I well, you mentioned Repulsion, and I said that this is basically just a variant of Repulsion. It's like you said, technically not bad. There are scenes going down the hallway that remind you almost of the hallway in The Shining, in the Overlook Hotel, and up and down the elevator, and this and that. And she goes through 3 days, I think it is, doing the same thing, and we see the same thing, and we're breading chicken or veal or whatever it is, and we're doing this, and we're sewing something, and there's clearly some kind of bizarre relationship between her and her son, quasi-sexual. I mean, I don't know any mother and child that would have that kind of a relationship. Not that they're having sex, but there's clearly something off between them, and you know then she gets in the second act or the second day, she gets a little bit wackier, starts, what does she do? She like carries stuff around that she shouldn't be, and the seams are
Yeah.
fraying, and then
Overcook some potatoes, that kind of thing. It's like
yeah,
domestic stuff.
yeah, and then by the third day, basically the big revelation is, oh, this is a portrait of a murderess, to use
Mhm.
the term of the 1970s. And with Repulsion, we know she's a murderess early on. We know there's also something wrong. We
What do
get
you, what do you mean by early on?
in Repulsion.
Yeah.
We the first murder of the of is it the boyfriend that she kills is something like
Yeah, all, but that's like halfway. So that's I mean, it's
well
halfway into the
that's a
film. Yeah,
relatively early
yeah,
on rather than literally the
hmm
last 3 minutes of this film, a three and
yeah,
a half hour film, relatively early on. But we know there's something wrong with her, the Catherine Deneuve character. Um, we there's the time where she pricks an old lady's finger and sees, I think, a drop of blood or something like that. It reminds me of a famous scene from both the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi, and also from Nosferatu, where Nosferatu sees a drop of blood. Um, we get we get the sense that she's off just by the way she sees things, and then we slowly get the we end up with the arms grabbing, and so we're put in the sense here. Now here we're outside of Jeanne Dielman, um, and and the thing too is though, I, I I also watched like Cleo from 5 to 7, another famous French film that rose high up the scale, and then that. Hey, guess who did Cleo from 5 to 7? Agnes Varda, and then we watched that other Agnes Varda one. What? The one that was in color with the couple and the guy cheats. Yeah, Le Bonheur. So I've watched a number of like of female French filmmakers, and oh, she was Belgian. Sorry, but it's one of these things that you can see in so many ways. And I know Roman Polanski's a white male, and he's a sex abuser and a rapist and whatnot, but he's also a far better filmmaker than Chantal Akerman. I mean, you can't watch if you watch these two films. It's maybe about 60% of the time. I forget. Repulsion is what, an hour and 45, less than 2 hours,
yeah.
I
Hour
think.
45. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically about half the length, and it says so much more.
hmm
And it what it doesn't say draws you in. That final shot of the young Catherine Deneuve looking off, the little girl looking off. What's she looking at? What I mean that's technical. Here it seems like they shot, and at the end, oh, uh, she's gonna fuck her third John, and then he's being a little boorish in the bed, and then she's gonna kill him, but we don't even see the fucking blood. I mean, we don't even get any sense of real. So it's not even a realistic film. Now people,
Well,
the
yeah, I think maybe not in the scene itself, but you definitely see the blood when she sits down. Her, her shirt is covered in
yeah,
blood, that kind of thing.
well, yeah, but I mean, she goes into the jugular. It would spray.
hmm
You could get. I mean, that's what blood pressure is. It's going to spray out like a fire hose. And so there are things. Watching it, I said there are some interesting things. If the scenes were cut down more, if it was edited better, that maybe you staggered some of these scenes a bit more in her memory. Are we seeing things in real time, or is this a memory or something? I was thinking of Stardust Memories, and the Dory scene where we see Dory's breakdown through the way Alan cuts it. And just to give you an example too, yesterday I finally got Rosalind Gallopin, this kid who's on the E-list, who I think you've contacted or been in contact with. Have you been in contact with Rosalind?
Yeah, he's also a patron.
Yeah, yeah. And so Rosalind sent me The Other Side of the Wind, the last film of Orson Welles, and it's a really good film. I think it's probably a great film. I'll have to watch it again. It's so far above Jeanne Dielman. It's not even close. I mean, watching the Welles film, it's like Welles. I mean, my God, really there's only Kubrick and Welles as the greatest of the American directors. Woody Allen has a number of great films, but he doesn't have the consistency, and he aped himself. And Cassavetes just doesn't have the numbers or whatnot. But watching this, and if you've ever gone and watched Chimes at Midnight, which I mean, John Huston is just phenomenal in this role. I mean, it's well, I'll talk about that more, but it's just so far above cinematically Jeanne Dielman. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And when people see these lists, what's going to eventually happen, people are going to say, but this is bullshit. This is shit. Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of film students who could make better Jeanne Dielmans than Chantal Akerman. But there's not a film student right now that could make a film the way Orson Welles did when he was 55, 60 doing this film, when he was a full-fledged master. I mean, it's just a joke, and it makes these Sight and Sound and any kind of polls like this when they put out. Again, I wouldn't say it's a terrible movie, but I would say it's a dull, boring, mediocre movie at its best.
Yeah, like even in the notes that I was saying, so these are my notes for Repulsion last night, right? It took an entire page. And here's a film that's literally twice as long. It took up half a page, right? And because at a certain point, it's like you could literally turn away from what's happening on the screen a lot of times
Yeah,
because nothing is actually revealed by some of the length of the shots. I guess you could say that, all right, so we're getting at some of the boredom, right? Maybe we're getting some resentment in her face, that kind of thing. But I think what really struck me here in terms of the differences between this and Repulsion is in Repulsion, you could sort of make the argument that both of them are about if you want to have like any kind of like feminist reading or whatever, like you could apply a feminist reading to both. But the difference is that the way that we get to the ending in one film versus the other, in Repulsion, it's totally logical, right? In the realm of who Carol was her name, who Carol is, right, as a character, right? You know that there's something off about her, right? You know that she has all these sexual hangups. And also, like honestly, like at the halfway point in Repulsion, when she kills her boyfriend, uh, she had like think about it. What's fascinating is at the very like right before he breaks down the door, there's that, or right after he breaks down the door, there's that woman with the dog, that neighbor that comes out, and she's just kind of like staring at him, like, okay, like what the hell is going on here? And it's just this guy that's talking and talking and talking, saying like, I missed you, I want you, blah blah blah. And she's like, and Carol is standing there, and she could ostensibly have a reason to be scared there, right? In that situation when she kills him, you could imagine if that was her only murder. You could imagine like a cop going upstairs to investigate this and say like, oh, well, what happened? Oh, clearly he broke down the door. Clearly she had this like candelabra, and she killed him in self-defense when he tried to rape her. And of course, the neighbor would have been, oh yeah, there was something very weird going on. There was a lot of ruckus, and that would have been the end of it, right? So there's so many sort of like logical points and all these like interesting little tensions throughout. So when you get to the end point, it makes sense. Here, it just literally comes totally out of nowhere. Now, you could say, well, of course, symbolically, it's all about a woman that hates the fact that she doesn't have a husband anymore. She doesn't have the kind of relationship maybe with her son that she wants. For whatever reason, she doesn't want to have any other relationships. She has to make money through prostitution. But those things in and of themselves, they don't lead to murder in a very kind of logical way. That explosion comes very randomly, right? It comes without reason, right? And that is supposed to be the deep point in the movie, right? That is the point that you're ever supposed to go back and say, oh my God, this says so much about male female relations, right? This says so much about patriarchy, but it's extremely forced. Right. And also, when I was reading some of the criticism, I think it was in Wikipedia where when they're describing the plot, uh, they very, they're, when they describe that final sex scene, for whatever reason, they say the two of them have like something like wild orgasmic sex. That did not strike me as wild or orgasmic in
yeah,
any way.
yeah.
It
I mean,
seems like
she's
first of all,
literally laying there with her legs clenched.
and pushing him away to
Yeah,
begin with, right? But let's just assume for a second that that Wikipedia description is what these critics are more or less thinking as well. If this is the sort of takeaway that people have from this film, all that means to me is just like in John Williams's Stoner, which me and Jill Parish did an artifact on that a year and a half or 2 years ago. Uh, there's this like bad character in the form of the wife, and the only time that she ever gets animated is when she decides to have a baby. She wants to become pregnant, so she becomes like a total animal, sexually, interpersonally, like all of that. So here, what they're saying essentially, and that's bad characterization, obviously, right? It's very trite. And in this case, it's like the same thing. It's like, so the only time that she becomes, someone of like this substance and action, it's what? It's through the route of like orgasmic sex, right? That's not very feminist at all, right? It's just a very silly way of viewing these things, right? They're sort of, they reveal in many ways kind of like maybe how they themselves might view women or that kind of thing. And it's also funny reading what was it? Oh, Armand White, right? Who I don't know why people consult him about anything anymore these days, but he was complaining. I mean, he had the correct complaint, right? He said that this is, it's boring. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's pointless. This is all true. But he initially starts his characterization by calling it like a work of Marxism. And it's like what is Marxist about this? It's just it's the most kind of generic sort of take that you could have imaginable on like women's rights or feminism. There's nothing inherently Marxist about it, but
I
anyway,
I
that's what I
remember
noticed.
after the first 30 or 40 minutes and seeing, I'm thinking, okay, this is how it's going to go. Excuse me. I remember seeing the lights flickering off in the scene of the cupboard when Jeanne is facing the camera, the sun is to the left, and there's the cupboard behind it, and you see the lights coming in through the window of the cupboard. And I'm thinking, that might be an area. Maybe she looks at it and gets hypnotized or whatnot, and maybe she remembers something from childhood or some. I was like, you can do something with some of these things. That's a moment that could have been pregnant with some kind of meaning. The way that Carol, as a child, is looking off in the photo on the mantelpiece or whatever it was, fireplace. But nothing comes of anything. Nothing comes of anything, and the only thing that comes is something that the murder out of nowhere. Is this supposed to be feminist? I mean, clearly she seems to be on good terms with her Johns. So why does she explode like this? Now there's the thing with her sister and uh, being invited to go to Canada and whatnot. Does she resent her sister? But all of these kinds of things are things that aren't there. That the filmmaker, the artist, is lazily trying to get you to extract from it rather than put something there to be needed and seen. It reminded me a lot because I was talking with Jess about uh, Ethan, and Ethan's a big Fassbinder fan, and I was like, Gene Dielman is like uh, a more formalist, better wrought Fassbinder film, but it has nothing going for it. It's other than that, it's an odorless fart. Yes, it's technically better than Fassbinder's films, but so what?
Yeah. And another part that I think is interesting is how like so like she strikes me as for at least a lot of the film, she seems to have a mature approach to her own life. She seems to have a mature approach to kind of like whenever she does end up commenting, it's solicited by her son, but whenever she does end up commenting on something like life or romance or past relationships or parenthood or whatever it might be, it seems logical, it seems rational, it seems like emotionally well adjusted, which is why again, like so I understand the symbolism, right? I understand, like, yes, all these women, they're housewives and they're bored and they're really bottling all this stuff in, even if like on the outside maybe they're maybe they seem to be put together, internally they're not. But again, you can't simply cite that as evidence when you have a totally kind of unrealistic move from what I just described, which is kind of like perhaps a mature approach towards life, to a totally unexpected murder, right? You could talk about it all you want in terms of symbolism, but the fact is, you ultimately need a character, right, to bring you there, right, to sort of bring the symbolism out, and it's not actually happening.